We think we have a pretty good handle on why people succeed or fail. We look at a brilliant CEO or a stock market whiz and think, wow, they must be a genius. But what if a huge part of what we call skill is really just luck? That is the powerful, and let's be honest, kind of uncomfortable idea at the heart of Nassim Nicholas Taleb's work. And today, we're going to break it all down.
So it all starts with this fundamental conflict happening inside our heads. See, your brain is this incredible pattern-matching machine. It's truly an evolutionary superpower. It helps us make sense of a really complicated world, connecting dots and finding meaning everywhere. But here's the catch. That superpower, it has a critical bug. It is so desperate to find order that it literally invents stories. It sees connections where there's nothing but pure, meaningless randomness. And that is the fundamental error that fools us again and again. So our first step here is to look at how our own minds play tricks on us, making us see things that just aren't really there. I mean, think about it. We've all done this, right? You look up at a totally random blob of water vapor in the sky, and your brain instantly goes, hey, that's a dragon, or look, a face. We are imposing order on a fundamentally random shape. That pattern-matching superpower we just talked about, this is its default setting. It's a feature, not a bug. And this tendency actually has a name. We overestimate causality. Our brains are basically hardwired to create these nice, neat cause and effect stories. Why? Because a world with clear reasons just feels safer and way more comfortable than a world driven by pure chance. We don't just like explanations, we absolutely crave them. And this constant drive to find a cause for everything, well, it leads us straight into another huge cognitive trap, the way we completely misunderstand success, because we only ever focus on the winners. Okay, to really get this, let's jump back in time to a classic high-stakes problem from World War II. The military needed to add armor to its bomber planes to stop so many from getting shot down. The problem is armor is super heavy, so you can't just slap it on everywhere. You have to be smart about it. So what did they do? They collected the data. They went to every single plane that made it back from a mission and mapped out every single bullet hole. And a really clear pattern emerged. The damage was all clustered on the wings, the main body, and around the tail. Now, the intuitive answer seems totally obvious, right? Reinforce the spots that are getting riddled with bullets. But is that really the right call? But a statistician named Abraham Wald saw the twist. He realized the military was making a massive mistake. They were only looking at the planes that survived. Those empty spaces on the chart, the engines, the cockpit, they weren't the strong points. No, they were the fatal weak spots. Any plane that got hit there never made it back to be counted. And this is the perfect example of survivorship bias. We see the winners, and we try to learn from them, while we completely ignore the losers. The most important data is what Taleb calls silent evidence, the stories of those who didn't make it. In this case, it was the empty spots on the plane that were shouting the real story. And this bias is absolutely everywhere. We celebrate the billionaire college dropouts, but we never talk about the thousands who dropped out and failed. We copy the habits of successful investors, totally ignoring the countless others who used the exact same strategy and went bust. As the slide says, you only ever hear from the winners. So we're misled by looking at incomplete data, but we're also misled by the stories we tell ourselves about that data. Our brains don't just want the facts, they demand a compelling narrative to go with them. Taleb tells the perfect story for this, the parable of the turkey. So imagine you're a turkey. For 1,000 days, a farmer comes and feeds you. Every single day confirms your belief that humans are kind, benevolent caretakers. Your confidence just grows and grows, reaching an absolute peak on the day before Thanksgiving. The turkey's model of reality, built on all that past evidence, was perfectly correct, right up until the moment it was catastrophically wrong. This is what he calls the narrative fallacy. We take a sequence of facts and we weave them into a neat, tidy story that makes sense. It makes the world feel predictable. We look back at a stock market crash or a tech company's success, and we build this simple explanation that makes it all seem so obvious in hindsight, when at the time it was anything but. And these tidy narratives are most vulnerable to Taleb's most famous idea of all, the black swan. This is that rare, high-impact event that just comes out of nowhere and shatters everything we thought we knew. Now, to really get this, Taleb says we live in two different worlds. First, there's Mediocristan. This is where things are pretty predictable. Imagine you have the average height of 100 people in a room. Even if the world's tallest person walks in, the average barely moves. But then there's extremistan. This is where one single event can change the entire picture. So imagine the average wealth in that same room. If Jeff Bezos walks in, he doesn't just change the average, he becomes the average. And most of modern life, from finance to technology, operates in extremistan. And you can really see what that looks like. On one side, you have the gentle, predictable randomness of mediocristan. But on the other side, that's extremistan. It's basically nothing, nothing, nothing. And then one single spike changes everything. That spike, that's a black swan. It's an event so huge it makes everything that came before it seem irrelevant. So a black swan has 3 key features. First, it's a complete and total surprise. Nobody sees it coming. Second, its impact is massive. And third, and this is the really sneaky part, after it happens, our pattern-seeking brains invent stories to make it seem like it was predictable all along. Okay, so if the world is dominated by these unpredictable black swans, how in the world are we supposed to live in it? Well, this brings us to our final section, a strategy for actually embracing uncertainty. The goal is not to predict black swans. That's literally impossible by definition. The goal is to build a life that's robust to the negative ones while staying wide open to the positive ones. So how do we invest, plan, and live in a world that we just can't forecast? While Taleb proposes something he calls the barbell strategy. And instead of taking on medium risk, you split your exposure to the 2 extremes. You put the vast majority of your assets, say 85%, in something incredibly safe, something where you're protected from a catastrophic loss. Then you take that remaining small portion, the other 15%, and you put it into extremely speculative, high-risk bets. Think venture capital or brand new technologies. With this approach, your downside is totally limited to what you invested, but your upside, your exposure to a positive black swan, is potentially enormous. It's a strategy of being hyper-conservative and hyper-aggressive at the exact same time, and completely avoiding that dangerous, unpredictable middle ground. So, this leaves us with a final thought. Recognizing the incredible power of randomness, it isn't about being cynical. It's about being humble and realistic. It's about questioning those simple success stories and preparing for a future that is, by its very nature, unpredictable. So the real question is, how will you apply that?